I just thought I'd mention we're really excited to have Ken here with us in Salina. He has been traveling, well, recently was in Eureka Springs and traveled up this way on his way out to Colorado. He hit me up and was like, hey, I'm coming through. Can we just like meet up and talk? And I'm like, we can do that, but let's see if we can do something else too. So that's how tonight started. We're really thankful to have you all here. This is one of our first indoor music and poetry events that we've had. And we felt like now was a better time than any to kind of jump in and experiment with it and see how everybody feels and what it's like to be able to have live music, live poetry, live art back in our lives again. So thank you all for coming out. And yeah, this event is sponsored by Salina Arts and Humanities. We're happy to be supporting this type of work in the community. And with that, I will give it up to Ken. Thank you for being here.
As Anna was saying, I was just in Eureka Springs, Arkansas. I left there yesterday. I was at a writer's colony for 2 weeks. But first, I was playing on the mandolin a little waltz that is on the tables where that's the CD, which is a giveaway CD. This is Portrait of an Artist to Santa Claus. That waltz is on that CD. So if you like that, that's on there with a lot of other stuff. When I was at the writer's colony in Arkansas, it's called the Writers' Colony at Dairy Hollow. Who has been to Eureka Springs? Anybody? I'd never been before. What a nice place. First time I've ever done anything in Northwest Arkansas. And before I left, I made sure I wrote a poem, and I'm going to read that poem. It's also on the tables that you got. Has an original title, a Salina, Kansas poem. Some days you think you've found a center here, the middle of everything, loving and true, especially if you look up into the sky, wondering what next. Such an honest place, a land like no other, if only you keep working, keep weeding, keep an eye on the weather. What next? Reseeding? A second planting? Spinach and kale? Keep your heart open, an ear to the ground. Listen. If you sense your own self growing, rejoice. And then I'll even read what I wrote underneath. If you're reading this, you must have had the exquisite sense to be at the May 2021 Portrait of an Artist to Santa Claus show at Ad Astra in downtown Salina. If you have the good fortune to know, or have the good fortune to know somebody who was, writer and musician Ken Waldman came to Salina due to the efforts of the wonderful folks at Salina Arts and Humanities. Here's an acrostic poem he wrote as a way to thank the community for hosting him. And if you know what an acrostic poem is, you look at the first letters on the left, going down, and you'll see what an acrostic poem is. Now I got one more Kansas thing to do, because I don't get through Kansas very often, but I'm going to play a fiddle tune. And I'm a long-time Alaska resident. Who has been to Alaska? So I see a hand raised. Have you been to Alaska in the winter also? Yes? And long enough to end up having a driver's license there at some time too? Or I never know, because sometimes I've asked that question. People know people that I know. Well, I'm going to play a fiddle tune that makes me feel like I'm back in Fairbanks, Alaska when I moved there. Now it's a long time ago. It was 1985 for a writing program for an MFA in creative writing, and I would play this fiddle tune in my cabin in Fairbanks, Alaska. And also, I should ask other musicians in the house here. Okay. This is a traditional tune called Old Joe Clark. poem called Old Time Fiddle Lesson. To learn, lock yourself and your fiddle in a room all winter and practice till you play with a twisty, heartfelt, rhythmic punch that approaches trance. Now, fiddling's not technical repetition anyone can master. It's the sound you make once you know and the blood you clog with your fingers, while that old devil music dances inside the box. That fiddle tune's on the very first CD that I ever made called A Week in Eek. I'll tell you about A Week in Eek later, but this show, Portrait of an Artist of Santa Claus, means that I give away CDs and books and that whatever it is that I've played. So that poem is not with that tune on the CD, but it is in the CD too. So I'm going to go into the audience, take that Week in Eek CD, and somebody raised their hand. They've been to Alaska. I realize that you realize you're going to game the system. When I ask a question now, you're all going to raise your hand, so you're going to get the free things. So I have a book here, The Writing Party, and now I'm going to ask one of these questions. Are there any writers in the house? Okay, there's some writers in the house. Well, I mentioned that I'm as a writer and writing teacher, I'm of the William Stafford School. Is that name familiar to anybody? William Stafford or Bill Stafford? Somebody who grew up in Hutchinson, Kansas. And I'm going to read some poems that are in this book called The Writing Party. This is a new book. I've never had a chance to give this one away, but I'm going to read 4 poems that I wrote for William Stafford. One's called Bill Stafford. I saw him read one summer in Fairbanks, the patter between poems, itself a poem, because he was like that, fully at home with words. That lit June night he offered thanks for some gladness or other, and laid planks of language that formed a lucky bridge from one thought to the next. What might seem to some a plainness too simple for poetry drank of poetry when he spoke. I reflected for years on his writing, could hear him chime, sly and instructive as I connected with my work. The voice said to make time each morning, to begin early on task, to learn from failures, to ask and to ask. This book has like everything I know about writing. I think until I wrote it, now I know a little bit more. But there's certain kind of poems that have rules. That one was a sonnet. There's a certain poem called a sestina where certain words keep repeating. And this is sestina for William Stafford. And the words that keep repeating are poetry, words, song, plain, taught, and Kansas. And I feel like I can definitely read this poem in Salina, Kansas. Of course, the trick to poetry is to have pen and paper. Words on a page will make a song. The words can't help themselves. Plain ones say it better, or so I was taught by a man born and raised in Kansas, who took plain Kansas with him in the poetry he later wrote. His parents taught him to honor both land and words. That wasn't so hard on the plains, where the grass made an easy song for a boy who listened well, for song sang everywhere, first in Kansas and then beyond. The plains later became mountain and coast. Poetry didn't mind, the words spilled their magic, taught him music, taught him, yes, writing was his song, that he could scribble gray words, not just shiny red ones. Kansas was good enough, and poetry would nod its head. Simple and plain it was, though simple and plain could be profound. Poetry taught him, too, to question poetry and reinvent song, which made for a Kansas that he filled with words like sky, sun, wind. Words that started on the plains, Hutchinson, Kansas, transported him to Oregon and taught him to be. His enduring song, have pen, paper, and make poetry. There are only words. He taught that plain and true made real song. A Kansas man. His avocation, poetry. And I got two more. This is the Kansas part. Then you're going to go back up to Alaska, I think, for the rest of the evening. I wrote this for his 100th birthday. If he was alive, he passed away, God, it may be 25 years ago now. So he would be, God, he would be about 105, 100 and he was in his 70s. Anyway, he would be about 106, 107. I wrote this poem several years ago. Bill Stafford, 100. Bill Stafford would never claim perfection, the neat round number. Rather, he was about edges, observation, lingering doubt, the stuff of happenstance and reflection, ease and mystery. He'd ask sly questions, answer with a slight shrug or nod, no shouts. Lines might include mountain, wind, button, trout, family. He was without pretension. If he were still alive at 100, I'd guess him still alert, sturdy enough to jot a few dozen early morning words, to acknowledge the day he might have said, for the sky, century's not so tough. Then he'd take pen, write of cloud, weather, bird. This is the very last thing in this book. Villanelle for William Stafford. And a villanelle is kind of poem where you keep repeating the same line over and over. So with sestina, you have the same 6 words that repeat with each stanza. This is the same lines. It should be something easy. Should, that word to watch for. A word that's easy to use and misuse. You'll agree or disagree that should is like more. It should be something easy, but maybe not. More or less, we live our lives before words that are easy to mistake. Work, family, country, love. We come and go. It's either or. It should be something easy, shouldn't it? It being the tree to climb, the brush to clear, the 4 words that are easy to line and break. How to free ourselves. To open that door, it should be something easy. 1 word, then the next. Easy. And that's a book. I think I'm probably only going to give away 1 copy of this. I got to buy this from the publisher, but I'm going to give it. There's somebody at the big table who raised her hand as a writer. So here you go. This is yours. You're going to get 4 more copies of that Salina poem. Thank you. Give her a hand for being a friend and being a writer. You'll tell the poems I do a lot because I have to look at the book. The ones that I don't have to look, I do at other shows. And this is a story, poem and a fiddle tune about how I got to Alaska. I didn't grow up in, somebody, I think it was Norman, was asking if was I from around here? I go, I am not from around here. I've never lived in Kansas. I don't even come through Kansas, even though a lot of people drive through all the time. But I grew up on the East Coast, outside Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, lived in North Carolina. In my late 20s, I moved to Seattle, and then I moved up to Alaska. And I've been an Alaska resident now since 1985, but I am a rare sighting in the state. And I'm going to do a poem called The Road, circa 1978 for Howard Nelson, but I'm going to play a fiddle tune called Chinkapin Hunting here. The Road, circa 1978 for Howard Nelson. We studied, this will be a little lesson on writers and musicians. We studied Kerouac, Ginsberg, Kesey, Hunter S. Thompson. Followed Lou Reed, Frank Zappa, Sleepy LaBeef, The Dead. Knowing we somehow need the marathon drive across West Texas, New Mexico, Arizona desert. 2 recent East Coast college grads guzzling bad coffee and beer at all hours in forlorn bars. Gambling time that didn't matter on geography and spirit that might. Hitting California midway between midnight and dawn, an extra bright February full moon shone like a ghost of a lamp. So we parked our Dodge van, slapped hands, and jumped out radiating caffeine at that cool and shadowy border. Climbing back in, popping open brews, we shoved John Coltrane in the deck, lit another smoke, spun the wheel, then rattled back on the road, aiming for Los Angeles, the Pacific, beyond. I didn't write that year, 1978, but I moved to Alaska in 85, and that was my beyond. That tune and poem is on this, and because it's been pandemic and I haven't been able to get around much, it's like generous mood. We're all out here, so the poem is in this book. The poem and the tune are in this. You're all sitting up close. Which one would you like, the book or the poem or the CD? You get your choice.
It's split open.
Okay, so the book, let's see. You came late, go get something.
All right.
You don't like the book? Okay. Oh, this is not a story to tell, but I'll tell it anyway. I did a gig at Sierra Nevada College a bunch of years ago, which is in South Lake Tahoe. And a guy came up to me who had spent time in Alaska, and he had a big white beard. And he was so proud of himself. He says, I have changed my name to Santa Claus. And I mean, he said it was really hard to do, but he had it on his driver's license. And he showed it to me, Santa Claus. I am not going to do that. Let's see, I have 2 fiddles with me. Are there musicians would understand why I have 2 fiddles tonight? And why I have 2 fiddles all the time? If a string breaks, that's good because I'm not going to be really quick, although some people are real quick. But I have 2. It's a good answer, but like I'm an educator. I go into schools a lot. If I gave this fiddle to your number 1 high school violin playing, phenom, he or she would start playing, and they would look at me really funny because I have a tune different, so I could play certain kinds of tunes. They played this one, they'd be okay. And I'm going to play something on this right now. I'm going to play a tune I made up, and I'll tell a story midway through it. And that tune that I played, I do this one a lot. I don't have to look at the book for this one. This one, if you play this kind of music, people hear this kind of music. I mean, I guess down in Winfield, they have that big festival. Hey, who's been to the festival in Winfield? I have not. but I have friends that do go, and I have friends who, I don't know if they come through Salina, but I'm telling Anna about them. They live in Lawrence, a couple, Howard Raines and Trish Spencer. Anybody ever see them or know of them? Really fine fiddle players. And I can say personally that no matter what my day is, I can take out the fiddle and I'm going to be happier. It's a happy music. But I bet, like everybody in this room, we're not always happy. And I have a friend in Alaska, a guy named Jack Fontanella, who plays, he had a fiddle. He doesn't really play the fiddle. Had a fiddle, I should say. But he's a guitar player, banjo player, plays the stand-up bass, calls dances. He's retired now, but his day job for a lot of years was with first and second graders, teacher. That is going to be a happy guy, or he better be, because he couldn't be doing that for years and years. And I saw him in the Juneau post office. Juneau, our state capital, is much different than Topeka. It would be as if the capital of Kansas was like Bismarck, North Dakota. You had to go all the way to Bismarck to get to the capital, and you'd have to get there by plane or boat. I mean, it's like our state is big. It's like double the size of Texas, more than double the size of Texas. Juneau is southeast Alaska. You can only get there by boat or plane. I lived in Fairbanks, Juneau, Sitka, lived in Nome. I'm officially an Anchorage resident now. But when I lived first in Fairbanks and then in Juneau, and in Juneau again, Jack was living in Juneau. And happy guy. I saw him in the post office, and he was the unhappiest looking guy I had ever seen. I said, Jack, how you doing? He said, not good. I said, not good? He said, yeah. House burned down. And the couple nights before, he and his partner, his girlfriend, now his wife, were out. They heard sirens. It was for their place. And when they went back, they had lost virtually everything. And Jack had really nice instruments that he no longer had. Juneau is, what is Salina, about 50,000? So Juneau is 30,000, but it's a 30,000 you can only get somewhere else. Imagine if Salina was 30,000. If you want to go, as I did today, I drove from Lawrence. I got a room last night in Lawrence. If you want to get from Salina to Lawrence, you got to get on a plane or a boat. You want to go to Topeka. You want to go to Hutchinson. You got to go anywhere. You got to get on a plane or a boat. There's no roads, and that's our capital. So, and the legislative session was starting. There was no place to stay, but Salina would be like Juneau in that when something happens in town here, part of the community, you're going to raise money, you're going to do something. If there's a fire, if there's an illness. Within a week, people found Jack and Jenna a place to live. Even though the legislative session was starting and there was no place to rent, they found them a place. People raised money, and Jack had a guitar. I teach writing sometimes, and I had this idea to write Jack a poem, and I wondered what those instruments sounded like before they burnt up. So, Burnt Down House for Jack Fontanella. The night of the cabin fire, in the midst of cupboards and kitchenware, closets and clothes, when the flames came picking. I like to think how the two guitars, mandolin, banjo, bass, and fiddle might have jumped out of their skins a moment to make the craziest, most raucous, caterwauling noise. Enough riotous jabberwock to fuel a dozen generations of old-time string bands before slipping back into maple, smoke hot and right, the instrument's last bright Denali festival of sound. I wrote that poem, and I gave it to him. And some months later, as he was remaking his life, I said, Jack, how you doing? I had heard he had that poem on his refrigerator. He said, I'm doing better. And then I said, Jack, I make up fiddle tunes. If you want, I'll make up a fiddle tune for you, Burnt Down House. And to this day, I don't know why he didn't say, fiddlin' poet, don't press your luck. But he said, okay. So I gave him the big question, key of A or key of D? And he said, key of D. And what you heard is what I did. And I'm going to play it again. And I don't sing much, but I sing this, and middle school, high school boys, this is the one thing sometimes they remember from my visit, is Burnt Down House and this the lyrics, which for this song it's not much, but I'm going to play Burnt Down House a few more times. Burnt down house! Burnt down house! Burnt down house! A burnt down house! For Jack Fontanella. We Can Eat was my first CD. Burnt Down House is my second. This is the big table, so somebody would really want the Burnt Down House? Sure. You got it. So, fiddlin' poet, I play the fiddle, do these poems, tell stories. I don't tell jokes, but I have, I guess the jokiest line I have is, in Alaska, you can do anything. Fairbanks, do a quick picture of the state. If Salina is here, the center of everything, and then if Seattle's all the way up here, here's where Juneau, our capital is. There's a town, Ketchikan, that's the border town. I lived in Sitka. Anchorage, the big city, 350,000 people. The whole state, double the size of Texas, 750,000. Anchorage is here. Fairbanks is here. Later, I'll do something in Nome, Alaska, where I used to live. It's all the way over here. Russia's right over there. It's a big state. And I moved there, I was 29, turning 30, could barely play the fiddle, couldn't play publicly, and had never written a poem in my life. I went to an MFA program in creative writing as a fiction writer. But 10 years later, I was Alaska's fiddling poet, because you can do anything up there. So big, so few people. I wanted to teach writing in a prison. Within a month of arriving there, I did that. I wanted to have a radio show. I had a radio show within 6 months. The one thing that was really tough, if this was Fairbanks in the middle of the state, and if there was, let's say, 25 people, you could almost be sure it'd be 20 guys and 5 women. There are always, I never could find a girlfriend up there. And what women would say about a guy like me, and I was in grad school, and I have to say about Fairbanks, which is a little bit bigger than Salina. It's about 65, 70,000 people. Second biggest city in the state. I was 5 miles from downtown, 5 miles from the college, and I was in the woods in a cabin with no running water. And to this day, it's still like that up there. And what women say about guys like me who live in cabins and maybe starting to write poetry and play the fiddle and can't have a girlfriend, it seems like it's just they say, the odds are good, but the goods are odd. That's the famous line. And in fact, I'm not going to do the poem, but I mentioned that in a poem. In the Secret Visitor's Guide book. You like that? There you go, Mike. You got it. Got to keep our sound man happy. I'm going to play a waltz. I'm going to play the waltz on the mandolin, too, is what I'm going to do. Tell a story. I guess I tell stories. This is the Fairbanks Cabin Waltz. I love Fairbanks. You wonder if you could magically get from here to, I guess, if you're going to do a big flight, Would you fly out of Kansas City or fly out of Wichita? Where would you fly out of? Wichita. So if you get to Wichita and then get to Seattle and then get to Fairbanks in the middle of the state, you wouldn't believe, if you were to look out right now, I mean, the temperature wouldn't be as humid as this, but it's a dry, but it could be 65 degrees. But this would also look like this at about 11:30 at night. From about mid-May till early August, you don't need a headlight in your car. It just is light, and it's amazing, wonderful. It's a great summer place up in the interior of Alaska, and you wonder why there's only 60 or 70,000 people. And in January, your average high is -5. So a 0-degree day would be warm. And we say it's a dry cold, but it's cold. And when I came through, I don't come through here much, but in February, remember that cold snap you had with the storms? I had my first gig since the pandemic. There was some grant money, and it was in southern Nevada. And I was driving across country that week to get that gig. And I was looking for a week I was going to drive across on I-40, but that was Oklahoma. And you know what, the weather was worse there. And if you went down on I-20 through Dallas, it was even worse. And I-10 was even really bad through San Antonio and Houston. So I actually drove and kind of zigzagged across. So I drove through Salina on one of those days where I think the wind chill was about -15 here. And I was grateful to do it because it wasn't so snowy. But this is the Fairbanks Cabin Waltz, which is, and I'll tell a little story about this too. Got a poem I wrote about my cabin that had no running water. My father, lifelong Philadelphian, visiting Alaska, could only see I drove an old dented van and lived in a small, mean, low-rent dwelling with shabby plywood exterior, peeling front door that couldn't lock, drab, unmatched furniture, a faded carpet, a ladder leading up to God only knew. House without plumbing where I hauled water from a spring 10 miles away, and sat daily to contemplate digestion in an outhouse with styrofoam seat. Father, to have missed the Arctic sky that thrills, the utter privacy and simplicity that comfort, the blueberry bushes that feed, the winter months that teach, the heater that warms, the loft with desk, typewriter, and mattress that realizes my dreams. Father, that you traveled 5,000 miles and missed my being saddens me. Only journey further. What once had been is elsewhere. And I'm going to play that waltz on the fiddle and then go into another waltz and go into another tune and see where it takes me. And then I'm going to go in the audience and give away a few things. I'm going to play a medley I have never put together before, so I'll see what happens with it. That was the Fairbanks Cabin Waltz, into one called Waltz into the Light, and into one called Miss Renee's Waltz. And they're on a couple different CDs. And then that poem was in one of the books. And I'm just going to go out and be Santa Claus here. Let's see, all originals, 31 tunes, 8 poems, and this book again. Let's see. CD or book?
Book.
Book? Got it.
Thank you.
You like those waltzes? Anybody? You like those waltzes? Yeah, this one. Let's see, this one has some nice waltzes. I just got here. This guy, you're lucky.
This is where that was, but
It's okay. I got those people back there. We're gonna get to everybody.
you think Fairbanks is there, right?
Yeah. Cool.
I like Tuskegee, that's what I was.
Oh, golly, I got Talkeetna Waltz. That one, you know, well, Trey would, you can see, you like that one. It's okay. Okay, let's see, what do we want to do here? I know what I want to do. So I tell stories, play tunes. There's a festival in Anchorage in late January. It goes over 2 weekends, the last couple weekends in January. Sometimes it goes the first weekend in February and the last weekend in January. It's the Anchorage Folk Festival. And I played it a few times, and I opened up talking about how I was in Eureka Springs and how I'm going to be going to Front Range in Colorado this weekend. I'm doing a show Saturday night. I'm leading some workshops there Saturday day. I'm going to be at a senior center Friday. And I did the same thing at my festival gig in Anchorage. I was mentioning how I was in Anchorage and I would be flying to the next day to Bethel, Alaska, which is down here. And from Bethel, I would be going to a place called Eek, where there was the Eek Authors Festival. And I'm what you call a value-added writer. So there's an authors festival, but because I play the fiddle, I can get invited to, I can do what a lot of writers don't do. And this Eek Authors Festival, I'd been to Eek a few times, and I was talking about that on stage, and I said, I'm going to be in Eek for a week. And when I said that, I said, I have to write a poem called A Week in Eek. And in case this is a special evening, in case you don't believe me, I mean, of course you believe me, but I have, keep going, I know, it's this special, I have my Eek Authors Festival shirt on. I hope the camera has this. Yes, so in case you think, like, he's just telling stories, you can't make up. Eek is a Yupik village. Kids in sneakers squeaking across the Eek school gym floor, streaking towards baskets, or else sneaking out of class to steal a smoke or a peek at an uncle's or cousin's sleek new Arctic cat. Meek kids, cheeky kids, rural chic kids, geeks, kids that speak weakened Yupik and village English that leaks articles, the and in particular, making language go creak so nice. Eek winter days, not quick, not slow, just a dark, freaky trick like the snaky bow of a rogue bachelor gussock playing fiddle those decades back. Unique Eek, where weeks pass in a day and an hour last weeks. Times as wild as any Dr. Seuss might seek. A week in Eek. I'm going to play the fiddle tune that changed my life. This is why I am here tonight, why I was in Eureka Springs, why I'm going to Colorado. Everywhere I go is because of this fiddle tune. And you're going to hear me sing. You heard me sing a little bit with that burnt down house, very little bit. And I'll do my quick singing story because once again in Alaska you can do anything. And when I was growing up outside Philadelphia, in the elementary school I was at, there was a choir. And they put me in the speaking choir. You know what that means when you're 7 or 8 years old? You know what that means. It means I couldn't sing. Then, fast forward, let's see, 7 or 8, another 16, 17 years. Has anybody spent time around Durham, Chapel Hill, North Carolina? If you'd spent time there in the early 80s, it's when I was starting to play the fiddle, which is now like almost 40 years ago. I was waiting tables at a slick natural foods restaurant called the Pie Wacket, and I could have been your waiter. And it was the kind of place people would go for their birthdays. And we'd all be singing happy birthday, except the other waitstaff said, go cut dessert, you're going to ruin our tips. So then again, when I was 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, I think it was, 24, 25, 26, 27, I was told, you cannot sing. But in Alaska, you can do anything. So I'm gonna do this tune called Cluck Old Hen. This is the fiddle tune, once again, that changed my life. There will be a little bit of a story, but I'm going to play this tune. Going to hear me sing. Cluck, cluck, cluck. Cluck, cluck, cluck. Cluck, cluck, cluck. Cluck, cluck, cluck. My old hen's good old hen. She lays eggs for the Salina men. Sometimes a one and sometimes a two. Sometimes enough for the hold-on crew. Cluck, cluck, cluck. And my old hen's good old hen also lays eggs for the Salina women. Sometimes a one and sometimes a two and sometimes enough for the hold-on crew. Cluck, cluck, cluck. And my old hen's good old hen also lays eggs for the Salina children. Sometimes a one and sometimes a two and sometimes three and sometimes four, sometimes five and sometimes six, sometimes seven and sometimes eight, sometimes nine and sometimes 10. That's enough for the Salina children. And you might be wondering, why would that change his life? What about that fiddle tune and that singing? What is he talking about? And I will take you back to more than 25 years now. Does anybody remember where they were in leap year, February 29th, 1996? Oh, yeah. Because I can remember that day. And there's some hands raised. I'll tell you where I was. I was in Brevig Mission, Alaska, which Nome is all the way over there. I had lived in Fairbanks, Juneau, Sitka, Nome, where I was a college professor. It's a long story how I stopped being a college professor there. Had an illness time, the quick version. Came through the illness time on the other side of it. Was no longer a college professor. I was living in Juneau, and I was starting to do what I'm doing now. It was the beginning of being the fiddling poet, the Alaskan fiddling poet. And February 29th, I was in week 3 of a 5-week tour in the area where I used to live in Nome. There's an island called St. Lawrence Island with 2 villages, Gamble and Savunga. You could look it up on look it up on a search engine on Google and you'll see Gamble, Savunga. I had been there. And I was in Teller, and I was in a place called Brevig Mission. The kind of thing that Salina Arts and Humanities does and what I do, I was starting to do then, and I was 2 days in Brevig Mission. Brevig Mission has 350 people. I was in the school for 2 days, February 28th and 29th, and on the evening of the 29th, which was a Thursday, 1996, the contract had me doing a solo show in the gym. There were about 250 people in that 350-person village. There was not a sound system. I didn't have Mike doing what he was doing. I didn't have an audience like this. I am a white person. That is an Inupiat Eskimo village. And there were a whole bunch of kids, and the parenting skills were not good. I don't think they're ever very good in that community, in that village. But imagine being on a gym floor with a lousy sound system, and kids are running around, crawling through my legs, and I had found out why there were so many people there. I was supposed to go from 7 to 8. At 8 o'clock, there was going to be a raffle, $50 raffle. I was at 1 hour opening act for a 30-second raffle. And I am a white person, and they did not care about the fiddling. They did not care about the talking. They were happy to see their kids running around. If any of you teach or do anything publicly, you know when things go well, you know when things go fair, and you know when things are going poorly or that other world. And I'll admit, tonight I have a little clock here, so I see how things are. There was a clock in that gym, and it was like that Groundhog Day thing where it just wasn't moving. And I was sweating, and I was playing and talking, and the kids were running around. And I played that fiddle tune. But I didn't sing about the Salina men, the Salina women, the Salina children. It was the Brevig men, the Brevig women, the Brevig children. Sometimes 1, sometimes 2, sometimes 3, and sometimes 4. The kids know their numbers, and I had their attention briefly. This fiddle music is square dance music, and I've been to square dances, and I always thought in the back of my mind I could be a square dance caller someday, which never really happened, except it happened that night because I had a brainstorm. Actually, I had several brainstorms. You're going to hear about them. I went sometimes 1, sometimes 2, sometimes 3, and sometimes 4, sometimes 5, and sometimes 6, sometimes 7, and sometimes 8, sometimes 9, and sometimes 10. That's enough for the Brevig children. All you children 10 and under, make a big circle far side of the gym. That's what I said. And I played the fiddle. And I looked up, and the kids were in the far side of the gym. And then I realized I had to have them do something. So I said, all hold hands, make a circle, all hold hands, and go to the left. Click, click, click. I looked up, and all the kids had their hands in a circle going to the left. I bet there's somebody here who knows what I had them do next. Go to the right. Y'all could have been there if you had the fiddle and been there. You were right. I had them all hold hands and go to the right. And a lesser fiddling poet with brainstorms would have just go to the left, go to the right, go to the left, go to the right. But then I had another brainstorm. This was the best brainstorm yet. Said, all you kids, you are now getting very sleepy. Make a big yawn, lie down on the gym floor, and pretend to go to sleep. Click, click, click. And once again, a lesser fiddling poet might have just let those kids sleep. But then I thought of something. I said, all you kids, You are now having a dream that you are all puppy dogs. Kids are on all fours going, woof, 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 woof. I said, back to sleep, back to sleep. I then played the fiddle. I said, you're now having a dream you're all kitty cats. And they went on all fours and go, meow, meow. I said, back to sleep, back to sleep. I had them be birds and whales and babies and culturally, well, they all know they're airplanes. I said, now you're all airplanes. And they're zooming around. And they were having a good time. The parents, they weren't thinking about the raffle. They were happy the kids were having a good time. There was one other white person there, a woman named Monica Dickens. She was the principal. She was happy. They were all happy. I was happy. Monica was happy. I'm looking at the clock that had been stuck at 7:05, and it was 7:25. 20 minutes, and there were still more animals to go. I could keep them going and going and going as I did, and I remember thinking, if I could survive this show in Brevig Mission, I could go anywhere and do anything. And that is not only the truth, but there's a little bit more to the story. I'm going to play that tune and sing it and then tell you a little bit more about what happened to me. Click, click, click. Click, click, click. Well, I got through that show, and then the next day was March 1st, 1996. The weather had turned bad. Couldn't get out of Brevig Mission. And the weather was pretty bad on Saturday, March 2nd. And I realized I was going to get stuck there. And I was trying to get back to Nome, the big community in the region, so I think the next week I was supposed to be going to Gullivan and Shaktoolik, which I never got to. Well, I did get to Shaktoolik the following year because a plane, I was visiting a teacher, hanging out. You have all the time in the world when the weather is down. And he said, I hear, and the plane that I was supposed to be on, they had canceled that flight. But the teacher heard a plane landing. He said, you can get to the runway. All these villages have their runways. If you can get there, you can see if there's room on that plane. They're going to take you back to Nome. It was a cargo flight. There was indeed room for one passenger. It's like you hitch a ride, like you could hitch a ride here or get on a bus. I mean, that's how you get at places. You get there by plane. There's no way to get anywhere else, or by dog sled maybe, but this wasn't the time or place. The weather was down. And that was March 2nd, 1996. And now I'm 25 years, 2 months, and a couple weeks removed from having survived a plane crash. And there's a longer plane crash story. I'll do the short plane crash poem that's, Salina's a nice sized place. Has anybody lived in a really small town? Like a few hundred people? Because Nome is a couple thousand, but Brevig is a few hundred. And Nome is a couple thousand. And once again, the story about Nome, and I lived there. I was a writing professor there. And I taught over the telephone. It was like before there was Zoom, I was teaching on the phone 30 years ago. And what people would say is, Nome, great place. It's like living in a minimum security prison. You can do whatever you want. You just can't leave. But living in a small town like that, Nome, I'll do this poem called Nome Celebrity because I'd survived this plane wreck. 2 years writing, teaching, fiddling, sharing all I could. I was known in Nome maybe as one of the crazies who rode a bike winter long. And then I walked from a plane crash. Old timers I didn't think knew me now greet me by name. I saw how others watched and whispered. And I let drunks touch me for luck. True story. Just like the Week in Eek, you can't make this stuff up. Although I do make stuff up. Click, click, click. Click, click, click. My old hen hen's a good old hen. She lays eggs for a line of men. Sometimes a one and sometimes a two and sometimes enough for the hold on crew. My old hen, she clucks a lot. Next time she clucks, she'll cluck in the pot. So I got some things to give away here. My first book, The All Traditionals. Boy, I told a bunch of things. And let's see. Anybody have like little kids in their life, kids or grandkids or something? What's that?
I have chickens.
Chickens? I have a kid seed that talks about that. Anybody have little kids in
I
their
do.
life?
I have
You do have a little kid?
7 grandkids.
7 grandkids? And then let's see. What would you like, sir? Would you like
You can believe that. I do.
first book? Oh, you got anything yet? Yeah, that is actually a crash story. I told you, if I come back again, I can do the long version. That's too long of a story to tell now. I could do.
My oldest is almost 40.
I could do. I have done, and I haven't done it in a long while. It's fun to be able to do so. I often play with people. Like when I'm in Colorado this weekend, I'm going to have a 4-piece band, including a guy who comes through here occasionally. Has anybody come across a guy, Willie Carlisle? I know Anna has. Willie's a friend of mine who I play with, and he's part of my show. And if you haven't seen him, when he comes through next, make a point of seeing him. If he's playing in a bar, he may be doing all sorts of things, but he's a real talented guy. But when I do shows with other people, I can only do certain things, and I tell stories with accompanists, and like if I'm playing like that old time fiddle lesson poem, people be when we do that in Colorado, all 4 of us can play fiddle. So we'll play. One guy will play fiddle, and then another guy will play fiddle, then 3 guys will play fiddle, and I'll do the poem, and then all 4 of us will play fiddle. And that's in an amphitheater, where you're doing like something big like that. So so I can tell a long story about my plane crash, but that's for another time and place, maybe. But I do have a long story, which I haven't been able to tell in a long time about my plane crash. But it's 25 years ago. We're already about an hour in. Should I go for a little bit longer? Thumbs up on that? Okay. The plane wreck? I don't want to do the train wreck. The train wreck. No, I don't have the train wreck. But I got a couple books that I haven't touched anything on yet. So I want to... For the writers out there, actually, I'm going to... This will be kind of fun to do this. I wasn't even going to do this, but I'll give you a writing lesson and a music lesson at the same time. This is a new piece for me. This book is called Leftovers and Gravy, and how this happened is the craziest thing. I got an email in November this past year, and we've had this pandemic time. My pandemic story is... I've been a single guy. The odds are good, but the goods are odd. But a couple years ago when I was on a tour with Willie, the first time he'd ever been out in California, and we had this big theater show with some other guys. We played a show in a town called Arcata, California, in Humboldt County. Has anybody been out there? Did a show, and it went really well. In fact, the guy who put on the show said, "You guys were the funniest show we've ever had. We'd like to have you back." Well, I haven't been back. Willie actually went back a few months later. But at that show, during the break, and I have what I didn't give away, I can also sell, or if you feel like, oh, this guy was pretty good, I'd like to get one of his things to give to somebody, I will be happy to sell you things. And there was a woman at the show, and we started talking, and all I had was her, and she left at the end. I didn't get more. I wanted to talk with her more, but I had her first name and her occupation. And I looked up, I don't think that's stalking. I just looked her up and I wrote her a letter. She wrote me back. She's my girlfriend these days. She's like, picked her up. She quit her job. She sold her house. She went on the road with me. She plays the cello. I didn't even know she played the cello. And we've spent this last year in Virginia, in rural Virginia, where she had a place where she's back from back east, even though she'd been out in California. And I was still touring, and I was visiting her last March for 10 days, and it was turned into 13 months. And in November, and I've been doing a lot of writing this year, but in November I got this email out of the blue from a guy from India who says, we want to publish traditional book of yours. And I thought the language is a little stilted, and I was like some kind of scammer. And I looked up, and it was legitimate. And this is the book. And it's called Leftovers and Gravy, and it's like all these odd leftovers of poems. And I wrote a poem called Leftovers and Gravy, so I've been wanting to publish it, but I didn't know who would do it. And I put all these gravy poems in extras. And I have this poem about this fiddle tune that I'm going to play. And I'll play the tune. And I love this tune. It's like also one of the only tunes that I can sing to. It's called Greasy Coat. I think this audience will appreciate this. I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't wear no greasy coat. I'll do the poem. I haven't done this enough. I should sing it and then see what we got to do next. I don't drink and I don't smoke and I don't wear no greasy coat. I don't spit and I don't chew and I don't go with girls who do. I don't wink, I don't joke, I don't pet no billy goat. There we go. And before I give this book away, with that, I got some timely poems in there, and I'll read. I guess I'll read this one. I have my in time of pandemic, but I'll read my 2021 poem. It's almost the last poem in the book. We're thankful the past year is done. It was near impossible, wasn't it? Improbable virus and remarkable corruption. We're thankful 2020 is kaput. Such trouble, wasn't it? 12-month junction that was near impossible to navigate. A climate we're not yet capable to fully reimagine. We're thankful that with so much abnormal, we're still here, you and I, even in what may be near impossible circumstances. We resourceful, phenomenal, irrepressible humans. We're thankful. 2020 was near impossible. It's kind of nice for having a show like this.
Yeah.
Who would like this book? This is not for everybody, but if you like it, got it. And I got another kid's CD that has that greasy coat on it. Got it? You already got stuff. So, what town in Colorado are you in? I'm going to be in Lakewood, right outside Denver.
That's where my son goes.
Yeah, I'm going to be doing the Lakewood Cultural Center. And it's like about sold out. I heard today we got 238 sold, and I think it only has 240. So it's like, at least it's. So has everybody gotten something, or has somebody like not gotten something? Oh, you haven't? Okay, a couple people haven't gotten things. I'll get to you. And we're at the very end of this. I want to thank you. I know Anna's going to come up and say a few words. Let's see. I started out with Old Joe Clark. That would have been a good way to end, but I'll play. Boy, I got to play a couple things here. Oh, I didn't do anything from my sports book, but that's okay. So I want to play a waltz that I have not played yet. What is a waltz? For the gentleman that I got a poem that I got a book, and I gotta actually open up this thing. So I want to thank Anna and everybody with the Salina Arts and Humanities, and I want to thank Tammy and everybody here at Ad Astra, and thank you all for coming. And I just thought of this poem, thought of sharing this poem. An evening of local poetry sponsored by the Nome Arts Council. So, it's like, here it is. We got the poetry and the fiddling. And Nome is once again on the far, it's about 3,500 people, half white, half native. I was the college writing teacher teaching over the phone in the earliest 90s for a couple years. A spread of reindeer, moose, king crab, smoked salmon, whale meat we dip in seal oil, Eskimo food which we wash with cold duck, Budweiser, a bottle or two of schnapps. Nothing special here. We speak of snow and wind and the nature of drift. We eat and drink as simply. So I'm going to share that, and I got this. I just played the Talkeetna waltz that I made up. Play it again. I don't know if I ever played that in front of people at a show. I've played it with friends, but. Give these ways. Anybody have any questions, requests before? I'm not going to tell a long plane crash story. Another time. I know this is a great town for the arts, and you do bring people here, so maybe I can come back. I was here like 15, 16 years ago, but that's a long time. 15, 16 years from now, I don't think I would be doing this. I'm older. Let's see, book or CD? Book. Is it okay with you, or you want a book too? You want a book? Okay, we'll go with that. Okay, I think I work. Now, who wanted that Talkeetna waltz? Okay, well, let me see. I'll get a book. Questions? Anybody? Requests? Anything? I teach myself to play.
Where'd you stay at in Lawrence?
Where'd I stay at Lawrence? Lawrence. I stayed at, I think, a Super 8. right on Iowa. I stayed at this, I think it was the Super 8. And I stayed there. I was saying to a friend, I'm a creature of habit, because when I drove across country in February, I don't drive through Kansas that much these days. It's been years since I've been driving through. And that crazy week, it was on that Saturday night into Sunday. I'd left Virginia where I'd been staying, and there was like freezing rain that was about to happen. So I left earlier. I spent a whole day driving. And I got to Lawrence. It was as far as I could get to. It was dark. I'd been driving off and on for 24 hours. And that Super 8, you cross the driveway, and there was a Chinese restaurant. And I go, okay. And it was pretty good, I thought. So when I went back this time, I said, I know I'm hungry. If I stay there, it's not too expensive, and then I can have dinner. And that's what I did last night. And then from there to here, it's easy. Yeah, it was easy, a couple hours. Yeah, so I mean, I have some friends in Lawrence, but I didn't, I'm just coming through, and I didn't even know I would get there. I didn't, I know tomorrow night where I'm staying. Sometimes I know where I'm staying a year out, and then sometimes I don't know where I'm going to be when I'm touring like this. So, but it was nice. Thanks to Salina Arts and Humanities, I have nice lodgings tonight, thank you, here in Salina. And I hope that before too long, I get to come back sometime. I know that I wrote the Salina poem, and I'm happy about that. So you got that. Take the CD that's there. That'll be all instrumentals with one waltz that has a couple poems on it. And thanks so much. Yeah.
Yes, thanks again. Thank you, Ken. If it's okay, I really love the Salina poem, and I've been thinking about the last stanza, and I'm going to just pull it out and read it again, because I think it's a really great note to end on. Keep working, keep weeding, keep an eye on the weather. What next? Reseeding, a second planting, spinach and kale. Open your heart and ear to the ground. Listen. If you sense your own self growing, rejoice. I love that. Thank you so much, Ken. What a gift. I wanted to mention the next event that Salina Arts and Humanities is working on is first Friday, June 4th. We'll have Catfish Jones out on the plaza out here. He'll be doing his original music. He's a solo musician. You might know him as Brad Hoppick. So that'll be another night to come out and enjoy some live entertainment from right here in our community. Thank you again to Ad Astra Books and Coffee House for hosting. And I hope you all have a wonderful evening. Thanks.